Welcome back to Life Without Secrets. In today's episode, get ready to gain powerful insights and practical strategies on mastering your time and boosting productivity. Our incredible guest, Jennifer Sonnen, is a time productivity expert with over 18 years of teaching experience, and she's a certified mastery coach. She's here to share her story from overcoming procrastination and people pleasing to setting effective goals and understanding the psychology of time perception. Let's dive in and learn how to take charge of our own most precious resource, our time. Jennifer, welcome to Life Without Secrets.
Oh, thank you, Jillian, for having me on this morning.
Well, I'm really excited to dive in. We were talking a little bit before, and I'm like, who hasn't said, like, I wish I had more time in my day to get all the things done on my list? Because, I feel like time really does like go by so fast. And, for someone like me, I like to try new things. I like to do a lot of things. And I do feel like there's not enough time in my day a lot. And so I'm so excited to get started on this conversation and to really dive into this and learn from you today. Also in the month of July, my husband and I have been doing like clarity exercises because, where do we want to spend our time, right? Like, what is the most productive way to spend our time and reach these ultimate goals that we have? And so, super excited for this conversation personally and for our listeners because I know I am not the only one that wants to like decrease overwhelm, gain clarity, and be
Mhm.
more productive with our time. So before we get started on all the tips and tricks, though, I really want to hear a little bit about your background so we can get to know you and what kind of led to become a time productivity expert, really.
All right. Yeah. And I have a very diverse background. I grew up on a farm in southern Ontario in Canada. And so that was definitely more physical labor and learned a lot of aspects from there and how to, you know, get done what needed to get done because it was physical labor versus now a lot of us are in more of a knowledge, more
Mm,
mental. And so that really kind of changed it. But I also realized as I was, growing up and I really became into a people pleaser. And I, I find that typically women tend to be a lot of people pleasers. And
mm-hmm.
so, in my 30s, I had my baby boy, he was crying, and my marriage was on the brink of collapsing. And well, it was collapsed. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize it.
Yeah.
And that really kind of was a wake up call that people pleasing wasn't making me happy. It wasn't, obviously, I wasn't making the people around me happy either. And it really woke me up to that time in my life where I was like, okay, I need to start taking responsibility. And I thought that responsibility was, you know what, let's make everyone else happy. And then their happiness will transfer and I will feel happy. But I wasn't. I was feeling more empty, more frustrated because I thought I was doing all the right things
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't producing the feelings that of contentment, happiness, joy in my life. And I realized then that you know what, I need to start taking different actions to see where this is going to go and produce different results because
Mm-hmm.
we all know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And, that is one thing that I definitely can take away from my upbringing is, you know what, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, then try something else.
Yeah.
And so, I really started to take some actions in that and then, found myself, because my ex-husband and I, we separated, divorced, and that now we were sharing custody. And so we were doing a week on, week off. And, you know, time just really became prevalent in how do I use it wisely and be more intentional with it. So, and you might have discovered this. This is one thing when I had him, it's like kind of a big wake up call because I want him to live life fully. And
Mm-hmm.
so the best way to do that is be that example. So it kind of, that was a wake up call in the sense of, okay, what am I going to do? So, especially when he starts walking and talking, he can see me and then he can model a good behavior. So
Yeah.
that's really kind of, my background. And as we get into some tips and tricks, I'll share some more stories, but that really kind of spurred into, taking responsibility for my life. And really, I feel that in order to do that, you have to be able to control your time, and not in the like aggression type, but it's like the responsibility.
Mhm.
So instead of reacting to everything, how can I respond? And
Mhm.
respond in that is in planning. So that's really where this started to come. And like I said, that was in my mid to late 30s, where but I also always had a desire to coach. And so that kind of came about, and I was just like, I got to dive in, got to some of those responsibilities. I realized I really love coaching. I love helping people. And I am a teacher trained, and have been teaching in elementary all the way up to high school. And, again, taking that responsibility, and teaching is a lot of coaching young people
Mhm.
on, how to manage different things. And one thing that I found very consistent was time, and no one can
Mm.
argue with it. Right. And
Yeah.
so I started out generally life coaching, and now I've niched down into time productivity, and optimize. One of my taglines is, live beyond the clock, meaning that once you figure out what's great for you, then you're living beyond the clock. You're not using and reiterating, oh, I don't have enough time. Well,
Mhm.
so once, yeah, so that's why I love it. Like, no one can argue. You have 24 hours, I have 24 hours. We got 168 hours in the week. So, how are we going to utilize that? And then the research and science behind time and time optimization is that not all hours are created equally. And
Mm.
so and I'll dive into that in a bit. So,
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive into that piece. That's really I love what you're just saying there is not all hours are created equal. What does that actually mean? What do you mean by that?
So research has shown that, if you can identify your peak performance hours, so where your cognition is on your prefrontal cortex, it's right online, and you utilize those hours to not push, but like get pulled towards your goal, those are the
Mhm.
hours that you should be using to move the needle. And so if you can work within those, usually it's 1 to 2 hours that is identified as peak performance, that you're gaining 3 to 4 because you're in the right frame of mind for that work period and to really move it. And so that's really my first step with all my clients, is to identify their peak performance hours in my energy mapping method,
Mhm.
and so that they can really utilize that time and then move forward. And so that's where, knowing where that is, and it differs for other people. And what I've been noticing too is that some people that are neurodivergent, which covers ADD, ADHD, all the gamut of things, is that
Mhm.
their actually peak performance hours are like 1 hour here and 1 hour there. So really
Okay.
utilizing the way that your body responds and has the natural energy fluctuations. That's really being able to identify that, because without that, a lot of times we try and push ourselves
Mhm.
into doing the work, and our brains aren't online for that. So it's about utilizing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, for someone like me, like, how would I know when my peak performance is? Like, what is it something that I feel? How do we figure out, like, okay, this is the best time that I should be focused on this project I'm trying to accomplish?
Well, I have designed a worksheet where you can track for 3 to 5 days. And, with the e productivity booklet. So it's about kind of taking awareness of, okay, what does my battery feel like? What does my energy feel like?
Mhm.
And so when you track that, then you'll start to recognize patterns. And then, um, if you want it more of an expert opinion, I synthesize the data and create a graph so that you can actually see when it is. And
Mm.
that's all related to how you feel at different points in the day. So that's, you can use the worksheets. You can take a book and just kind of be like, oh, okay, when did I feel like I could, really take on a task and really get through it?
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah.
so building self-awareness around your day, basically, in a sense of,
Yeah.
like, how do you feel in during those hours? What did you get accomplished type of situation?
Yeah, and so then because even that, you identify those peak performance, but the great thing is that at like 75% battery level and 50%, they're not bad times, but you could be and should be doing other activities. Like collaboration is awesome when you're at 75% because
Mm.
now your brain isn't trying, like it's a little bit more relaxed, and so that's great for, bouncing ideas off of, with a colleague or,
Yeah.
like you were saying earlier with your husband about, okay, well, what do we want to do with our time? What does that look like? That would be a good time for collaboration. Whereas your peak performance hours, maybe, well, you yourself brainstorm what you want to, your goals and your relationship goals, and then you come together so that it's kind of working together in that aspect so that you're able to bounce off one another
Mhm.
and see maybe that you can combine the two lists and see
Yeah.
where there's synergy. So,
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's funny that you say that because without actually realizing it, I felt like so my friends and I, we have like an hour where we'll work together and we're not really like talking or anything, but the fact that she's like on Zoom and I'm working on something I need to get done and she's working on something she needs to get done, it holds me like accountable for that time
yeah,
because I don't have like the battery to actually stay there myself. So I kind of use her as my accountability partner to like finish my task. And so it's interesting that you say that. And we've kind of figured out like a time, like, hey, how about this time? Does that work in your schedule? And it's usually around like 10 or 11 for me, and it works for her too. And we get stuff done, and it is so helpful. And so, is that what you're talking about? Like collaborating and using someone else to like actually finish a task? Is that what you mean? Is
yeah,
that
I
another
love that.
example? Okay.
Yeah, I love that idea. And exactly, because it works for both of you and you are collaborating because you're using one another to help, yeah, hold yourself accountable, like you said. And exactly. And in a team setting, like I'm working with a team right
Mhm.
now of 8 people, and that collaboration time are the people that they're working on projects with. The same thing, to move
Mm.
forward in that. And I love that because you and your friend are coming together and say, listen, like we're not collaborating together, but we know we can hold each other accountable because we're a little bit maybe, yeah, and it keeps everything in line. Whereas
Mhm.
like, 50%, 25%, when your battery is definitely, getting lower, is like routine messages. And so, you know, just knowing that, and so walking people through that, and you know that that will create an energy roadmap. And so that would be the ideal. So like you said, you discovered yours by trial and error, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
this time works for you. And so being able to be flexible with that, I love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, during these times, you're kind of talking about specific things we do during, like, when our batteries are full versus when they're 50% or 25%. And I love all those points. So people should go back and really like take into account, write stuff down for their day. I want to also talk about like intentional time management because I know this is something that you have talked about as well. So can you explain like what is the power of intentional time management? And how can this help us in our accomplishing our goals or getting our tasks done?
Yeah, and it helps to guide. So with that intentional time management is identifying the goals that you're working on. And I'm a pretty big believer on 1 to 2 goals.
Okay.
I always try and encourage my clients and myself to have a health goal. Just a philosophy, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you have to go into fitness competition. It could be just, this is what I'm working on.
Yep.
And so that know what that looks like. And then 1 or 2 other goals depending on, your task at hand.
And when
And
you
so
say 1 or 2 goals or 3, does that mean like in a year, in a day? What are we talking about?
Depending on how long we're working together as well, and just even generally, I like at any point, you can have a bigger vision,
Okay.
but what's my 3 to 6 month goal?
Okay.
Or what's my goal for the month kind of thing that's kind
Okay.
of broken down. And that's one thing with time management. I think a lot of people, they're like, okay, in a year, I want to do this. And then they keep focusing on that, but they're not breaking that goal down.
Yeah.
Where I like to strategize and be, okay, what is the goal for my week?
Yeah.
And then does it, I ask myself the question, does it relate to my 3 month goal, my 6 month goal, like, my overall vision and that? So it kind of draws it into it. And so being intentional is like really looking at your week and say, okay, I like power list. So I don't necessarily have like to do items. I have a
Mhm.
power list and I ask myself at the end of the week, what is going to make me feel fulfilled that I've accomplished? And so then I hit that's my power list.
Mm,
So again, I'll have 1 to 3 power list like items on my power list.
yeah.
And then in when I usually do mine on Sunday, I look at my week and say, okay, where are my peak performance hours? And some weeks I know I'm only going to be able to identify and work in my peak performance time maybe 3 out of the 5 days. And
Mm,
that's okay, but knowing when that is so that I can set realistic expectations on myself and know that. So then I will block that time out. It's like a
mhm.
meeting with myself, a meeting with your, like you said, your girlfriend, that where you have the Zoom on and you guys are both working on independent tasks, but it keeps you accountable and it's
Mhm.
also intentional. And your body itself, and this is kind of like I'm a very holistic person. So if I know on Sunday and I've set out my power list, I've blocked out my peak performance time, I maybe even blocked out my collaboration times, my body relaxes and says, okay, I've got this,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not to say that other life isn't going to happen, but it's easier to move around
Mm,
and to be able to say, okay, I know if I didn't hit my peak performance and I had it blocked out for Tuesday, well, Wednesday, I'm going to be more motivated to make sure I'm going to set my boundaries around there and
mhm.
know what that looks like. So it can that intentional time management just helps to steer us, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
know if and when we go off track to come back. And so it's kind of like a GPS in our car, right? We put in our objective and then, wherever we want to go, we pick the route, but
Yes.
sometimes we miss that one turn and it tells us, okay, you turn or take the next street. So that's what it is. And a lot of are we on track to our goal is an off step. Then we know we're off track, right? And then we go, okay, we need to come back. So that's what intentional, like what I mean by intentional time management. So I know my intention for that week is going to build me closer to my overall goal in that. And then knowing what that looks like, right? And what I have been finding is that people like to, we've been trained to react like, okay, I've got the meeting, I'm going to go there, right? But they don't really put any time in to really figuring out, like you were mentioning you and your husband are doing those clarity exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had to be intentional about that and say, when are we going to fit this in? Are
Yep.
we going to make it a weekly show up, we're doing this, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it gets done, right?
Yep.
And that alone sometimes is so amazing once we write it down or we, and again, commit and have an accountability partner that, wow, it wasn't that hard to do. I just needed to make the time. The time was always there. We just needed to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And what do you think about, because whenever I have something even bigger, maybe that I'm investing in or an event that I'm going to go to, before I purchase or before I go somewhere, I usually try to set an intention before I do something. So I know
Mm,
like why I'm there, what I'm gaining from this, um, and what I want to get out of it and how that pertains to something in my life that I'm reaching for. So
love it.
is is that something that you kind of recommend even in a bigger picture?
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, in teaching, we call these learning goals, right? All
Yeah.
right. So at the beginning of the lesson, at the end of today, this is what we're working towards, right? And
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
I love that. And, you know, again, encourage my clients to really look at it, especially if their job entails a lot of meetings.
Mhm.
I you know, the question is, what is the point of this meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you want? And again, it helps definitely our brains to start be on the lookout for it, right? And
Yeah.
so well, I've read through and I'm reading through again. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics. So it's an old book, like
Mm.
in the, I think it was written in originally, like I have it actually right here.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's by Maxwell Maltz. And he talks about, you know, our unconscious and the success mechanism, but it can be also a failure mechanism. And really, the information that we give it, so through our thoughts, our actions, our feelings,
Mhm.
it's going to start looking for it. So when we're more intentional and really direct what we're looking for and what we want to feel and experience, then it goes to work to help us locate that. Because we all know we see so much in a day that our
Yes.
brains filter through it. So
Yeah.
the easiest way to filter is that we're telling what we want to filter. So,
Yeah, and I think to that point too, I think that there's a lot of people, including myself, that like I get overwhelmed because a lot of times because there's like I'm very multi-passionate. I like to like learn new things and do new things. But like with social media and emails and text messages, there's like a lot coming at us, and a lot of things that are like wanting our time and attention. And it can be like at any point during the day, right? And so I think that there's um, that can create overwhelm and then also, lack of time. Especially for me at least. So in the world that we live in, I think it is really important also just to set those intentions of our time because otherwise, like I think there's so many other things in our external world that will just take our time from us, our attention from us, even when we don't intend for it to. Do you feel like that is something in the world that is also affecting us and making us feel like overwhelmed or we don't have enough time?
okay. You just cut in and out there, but I just want to make sure I've got the question.
Yeah.
So just about all the like stuff that gets thrown at us, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
is that's what you're asking, like that just it definitely is a distraction,
Yeah.
100%. And um it's interesting because, and this is one philosophy, like one kind of conviction that I've really adopted, and it's really helped me to open up my time a couple years ago in the sense of, you know, never have enough time. And
Mhm.
we, I've removed it. I
Mhm.
like that kind of verbiage in my sense because until we have created, we can collapse time, and that's where that peak performance comes in.
Yeah.
And then know that all time is like it's a choice.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we wish we could do a million and one things, but we can't,
Yeah.
and I mean multitasking, we know it, there's no such thing.
Mhm.
We divert. And so knowing that you just we all just need to make the right decision right now, and deciding what we're going to choose first, I think is, and our goal, and then being so happy about that goal, and
Mhm.
knowing that is going to be the kind of, you know, the one that we're focusing on, and just really, exciting the juiciness. And it's easy to get distracted, and that's where also intentional time management and blocking out our time and scheduling in, okay, when am I going to check my emails? When am I going to,
Yeah.
check the social media?
Yeah.
And that really helps, especially during your peak performance, because, you can get distracted. Are you going to, shut off the notifications? And so becoming a little bit disciplined with that is going to help you tenfold, because it's going to open up, and again, open up some time and space so that you're not going to go down a rabbit hole if you're on
Mhm.
social media,
Yeah.
and kind of move in there. And it takes discipline and knowing, okay, what am I doing here? And even sometimes, and a lot of misconception comes with, like, I just want you to get, like, as a time productivity expert, like, I just want to get more done. And that's not the case. I want you to live, to have such an amazing life that you're happy with the amount of time that you have. And
Mhm.
so that's where the whole living beyond the clock is saying, given the time and space, this is what I'm going after. And yes, I build in, time, because I utilize my time, my peak performance hours, and all that other, at the battery level, that I'm good. Like, I'll watch an hour of TV shows, and they're, it's just to relax with my partner, to, enjoy that time and space. And even that, being intentional with it, makes me and allows me to really enjoy that moment. Like, I'm not thinking about, oh, I should have done another social media post in this,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
yeah. Does that
That makes sense. Yeah,
answer?
I think I totally agree. I think it is super important to like block out that time. Okay, like if you want to be on social, like block out 30 minutes for it in the middle of the day when you're at 25% or something, you know. I mean, it makes total sense to me. I think another problem that we see a lot and that we're all probably guilty of it, you know, in some point or another is procrastination, right? I think this is a common challenge for a lot of people. So, what are some strategies that you would recommend for maybe breaking a cycle of procrastination and becoming more efficient?
Yeah, and with procrastination, I it's really done on an individual basis. I have
Okay.
some posts about it, but also I think there's kind of like two different types of procrastination, if you will. Like,
Mhm.
the one where it's like overwhelm,
Yeah.
because you're trying to do too much in a
Mhm.
small amount of space, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know tons of people who have to-do lists, and
Yes.
then, they're like trying to hammer it through. And it was interesting because I've said this to many clients. I'm like, how long does this list take you? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, you don't know, but you have this list for today, and there's physically not enough minutes, hours in the day. So you need to set realistic expectations. And
Yeah.
so that one type of procrastination is that there's so much that they don't do anything because they're so overwhelmed and they don't have a realistic idea
Yes.
on that. So the first step would be time your tasks. If you're a task person, like I said, I love powerless. I still
Me too.
have tasks. And so but they tend to flow faster than a daily to-do list because I know at the end of the week I'm going to have that done, and it motivates me because like I like competition, and like like it's a competition within myself, but it just flows a bit faster. So time the task so that you have a realistic expectation. And another thing that I use and I share with my clients, it's a time cube. And you set it, and for let's say 20 minutes you decide, and then you go after that task.
Mm.
And so that really helps to know, to get you motivated. And then if you've done the awareness of, okay, I think my peak performance, or if you do the energy mapping method with
Mhm.
me and get your roadmap, timing the right activity is critical too. If your peak performance, it's not a great time to be like really trying to brainstorm a whole bunch of different creative ideas. That's fantastic during your collaboration and your 50%
Mm.
time, right? So picking that right time of the day to do that whatever you're procrastinating in that. And usually you can ask yourself this: am I procrastinating because I'm missing some information? I don't have the skill to do the thing that I want to do. And and so knowing those two things, then you can hammer it out,
Mm.
right? Like, do I need to go gather more information? Do I
Yeah.
need to work on a skill? And then a lot of that becomes kind of with the goals. Am I strategically doing, the steps up the rung of the ladder to get to that goal, or am I trying to jump too far? So bringing it back down.
I love that so much. I think that is so important. Really something to like sit and reflect on. Like asking yourself those questions. Like, am I missing a piece of information and that's why I'm procrastinating? Do I need to practice this skill so that I don't procrastinate? And then putting those strategies into your calendar so that you don't procrastinate on the actual bigger goal. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah. And the last piece would be, well, and it can be the first piece, is looking at your belief system,
Mhm,
or
mhm.
those,
Yeah.
general society. And so a lot of times when I mention peak performance, a lot of people, I had a client, she is a night owl. Like her time is at night. And I'm like, oh no,
No,
like
me either.
I'm yeah, like get it. I like doing things in the morning, and my
Mhm.
peak performance time is like 5 to 7, right? In the morning. And to some people, but she kept on trying before we worked together. She was trying to live to society's expectation, right? Because there's so many books about your morning routine,
Yep,
you
yep.
hammer it out. And I said, what if you just work with what works for you? And she's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? I said, your peak performance time, like you're on fire at night. Like you just love it. You put your kids to bed and you can hammer out your, your social posts, your emails, like your strategies for your business and everything. I said, utilize that and
Mhm.
be okay that you wake up 15 minutes before your kids, because that's the way that your body works in
Yep.
this time and space. And she's like, oh, I said, yeah, forget about what society says. What works for you and
Mhm.
that effectiveness?
Yeah. So good. So I heard you say too, like, I don't really say things like there's not enough time in my day. Like Isn't that what you said? Something
Yes.
to that line. Okay. So like let's talk about that because I know you're big on like perception of time. Like
Hmm.
can we help myself and listeners better understand our perception of time and manage that?
Yeah, and it it will begin with awareness.
Okay.
So an activity I used to do and have my clients do is catch yourself during the day, whether it's a thought or you're saying it, I don't have enough time. Oh, I wish I had more time. Okay.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
and creating that awareness will, number one, just really bring it, especially if you write it down on paper or put it in your notes on your phone. I have sometimes, like, I'll send people a checklist and they just check off, yep, okay, there was another thought, right? And a lot of times we'll have the same thought, we just keep repeating it.
Yep.
Then you question that thought. And this is a lot, if you've ever heard of Katie Byron, her work on just a lot of questioning. So then if you have that awareness of, okay, these are the thoughts, then you can go back to that thought and say, is it true?
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know,
Mhm.
and is it true? And what if I just try not to say that anymore and try
Mhm.
not to think it? Because it's almost like it's perpetuating that negative thought.
Mhm.
And I'm a big proponent, like, even I'm going to use driving because I love driving. You know, if you're going in reverse, we know you're not supposed to throw it into drive, even though we want to go forward. We got to get into neutral,
Mhm.
then go into drive. So my suggestion is always just try and remove it and see how, and accept that. Like, okay, can I remove that terminology instead of going to the whole extreme of like, I optimize my time. Like, you don't believe it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to work with what is happening. So that is really one thing to take a look at. And then trust, that whole trust in yourself, trust that there is enough time, then working towards that, you know, and um, people really, if you sit with that, what if I just trusted that it's all working out?
Mhm.
Because I tend to work with high achievers. You're a high achiever, right? I think we fear sometimes that we're not doing enough,
Mhm.
and we're doing more than enough.
Yeah.
And it's you know, our primal mechanism to keep us safe. Well, to keep us safe, let's say that we don't have enough time, right? So we're trying to jam more, jam more, jam more. And that's not, in my opinion, the way to optimal living. Optimal living is, you know, loving the moments that you have each time, not just necessarily trying to bank up the time to enjoy that one moment, right?
Yes.
And so that's the way I look at my life now, and truly have started to enjoy it. And even with my clients, and sharing that I'm not running around trying to jam everything in, to look forward to the weekend. I love what I do all the time. And
Mhm.
so being able to have that balance, and that comes with trust. And if you can trust that you're intentional with your time, it doesn't mean that you're going to get some feedback and say, okay, maybe I'll make this change, right? But trust that no matter what you're moving towards, it's a journey of your how you want to manage your time. It's not a one and done. And especially, with children, that
Mhm.
different stages, right?
Yep.
Different stages, different phases. And yeah, a lot of it is that trust.
Oh, I love that. And I also want to go back in because I think this is another challenge. I want to hit on some challenges that like I've faced.
Hmm.
I know other listeners have faced in the perception of time, in time management. And so I want to go back because I know that you can relate to this in your story that you mentioned is being a people pleaser, right? And wanting to take care of everybody else's needs and kind of leaving our own goals or aspirations or to do lists on the back burner. And then we also feel overwhelmed And like, can we talk through maybe some steps that even you took to really transform your mindset or habits, and how we can do the same when we tend to be more people pleasers? I always call myself an overcoming people pleaser.
Yes. Me too, because I still catch
I
myself.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, my story was like, my big wake up call was when they call it marriage breakdown. That's what I was told at one point. That I tried so hard
Mhm,
to please my way out of it. And I was just like, okay, well, being realistic and not judge myself for, well, that didn't work, because it didn't, and then saying, okay, well, if that didn't work, let me try something else in that, and knowing what that looked like. And so then I just started to really realize, because I was at that point, I had low self confidence,
mhm,
my self image was non existent.
mhm,
And so I just started to discover what I liked. And a lot of times that's what I find with um, people who people please all the time, that, you know, feel super bad by saying no, don't know how to, you know, set those boundaries. And that's what a lot of it is, because they don't know, like I was lost. So then
mhm,
I just started doing small things. What did I like? Like even just adding a bit of fun
mhm.
into my life, because that's what I find is a lot of people pleasers, there's no they're not doing anything to bring any joy into their life. They
Yeah.
think, "Oh, I'm gonna get joy." And some people do, right? And I do too. I get happiness by doing something that my, partner wants to do. But I know that, but I also know I need to take care of myself, because if I don't and be responsible for my happiness, that it's going to ripple out and nobody's going to be happy, right? Like the saying,
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
mama ain't happy, no one's
Yeah.
happy.
For real.
Like
Yep.
it's that ripple effect. So knowing when you're people pleasing, you get like, I don't know about you, but I get that feeling like, oh, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like I have to. So then
Mhm.
I'll take a moment and create some space, and it doesn't have to be much, and say, do I really want to do this? And sometimes, it's yes, because I know how excited this person's going to be. Okay, then it's like, do I have time to do it, or do I need to reschedule it? Because sometimes yes, you want to do it, but maybe not within their time frame. So then that creates a communication, a dialogue. And I think uh, yeah, the recovering people pleaser is that we don't even feel like we can ask for another time. Like we
Mhm.
think if someone asks us to do something, it has to be right then and there. And it doesn't necessarily. It can, that's where that communication. So I think part of people pleasing is also just asking a question like, yeah, I'd love that to do that with you. My next opening is this time. Does that
Yeah.
work for you?
Yeah.
Or, having being okay with discussing, okay, this is, when that time is. And as I'm talking now, I remember, because I used to never schedule my time.
Mhm.
Like someone would ask me, "Hey, do you have time for this?" And my calendar would be open, and I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, it is," because it was wide open.
Mhm.
Now, now my calendar, because I'm intentional with my time, is set on Sunday, and I don't want people to think that I have every minute scheduled. I don't. And I purposely do that so that there is that time and space for freedom. If somebody asks me to do something, I can look at my calendar and say, hey, you know what? Love to do that with you. I can do it in a couple hours. Does that work?
Yeah.
And so I think with that really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And
I think
and
so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's
And
been true for me too. Because I am definitely more of one to people please. And I think it's interesting though, because I have found that when I talk to other people pleasers, that haven't set those boundaries or that haven't learned maybe the hard way even, or they haven't got to that point where they want to like change something, um,
Hmm.
they're like, I am very big. I'm like, okay, yeah, like let's plan it on the calendar for next Friday at 2 o'clock. And now I'll say stuff like that, and I kind of almost sometimes feel like a little bit of hesitance, like, oh, like the only time she has time for me is on Friday at 2 o'clock. And just like you're saying, I'm like, well, I have other open areas, but if I put it on my calendar, like, then, and it works for your calendar too, like, I know it will happen and I know I'll be present and like, it'll feel good, you know,
Exactly.
and rather than being like, "Oh, yeah, like, let me do 10 o'clock," but then I'm thinking like, "Well, I also have these other goals that I need to accomplish that day," and it's not that I have, like, some sort of, like, super strict schedule, it's just I like to plan my time so I can be more present and enjoy it more, and so
Exactly.
it's not and it feels better. It doesn't feel like I'm strapped or I'm there but I'm not there, or I'm people pleasing and I'm thinking about all the other things that I need to do, or that I didn't make time for myself because I'm now doing something for them even though I love them and I want to, and like there's like this internal struggle. And so yeah, I have learned, like it's okay to be like, oh yeah, how about next Friday at 2 o'clock, like does that work for you too? And I think just having that understanding that that means to me, it means like you matter to me and I want you on my calendar and I want to spend time with you and I want to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I I just, yeah, I think we're all individuals. We all have, you know, kind of missions on our hearts to do
Hmm.
certain things, and then to have that confidence to step forward and say, yeah, like, this is important. And being okay with voicing that,
Hmm.
it really does make a difference, because I have friends that they'll never like hammer out a time, but then, you know, and I'm just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not gonna keep
Hmm.
chasing you. And I guess because I know on the other side that I'm I'm so happy with myself, that if if a friend or, someone says to me, well, you got to scheduling me in, like you have no other time. I'm like, well, yeah, I do need to schedule you in, because like you were saying, you are important. But if you're not gonna, you know, afford me and like respect that I'm working towards something,
Hmm.
then I guess that's different.
Yeah.
That's,
No,
and
I totally
yeah.
feel that. And the other challenge I want to touch on, that I think is really important and a lot of people can relate to, is like having these multiple roles that we play, like, mom, sister, daughter, for me it's nurse, there's all these different roles that I play, and I know other people, I'm sure, are feeling the same way. Is there any advice you have on managing our productivity and time management within all these roles?
Yeah, a couple for sure. And that's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Because they are all different roles. And I think being clear on our current goal,
Mhm.
what you're working towards, and then intentionally scheduling the time so that you have it kind of blocked out. And, truth be told, I still teach. And so
Mhm.
what has happened now with my business as well is that I am way more focused and clear at, when I'm teaching and when I am dedicated creating my lessons. And it almost like creates a little like spark and excitement for myself on that, and knowing what does that look like. And
Mhm.
again, with those different roles, when you intentionally set your schedule out, I personally have found that you naturally fill all those roles in, right? And sometimes, like, that's where the power list for the week, like, what is my overall goal for that week? And if something happens, I'm able to kind of flex it in there. And
Mhm.
so that makes a difference. And I think really coming back into yourself and your overall vision of what you want your life, your, what you're working towards, how you want to see your life structured, that makes a big difference too. So knowing what that looks like and being able to, I'm very value based. So I have 5 values. So a lot of times my rules will fit within those values too. So
Mm-hmm.
um, being able to really kind of know where you're going and be good with that, I think is really key. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I think that, um like for me, it is like, okay, and I mean my kids are getting to the point now where I can be like, "Hey, mom's going to work on this for, an hour." And so, you can do your 30 minutes of reading and then you can watch a show for a little while so I can get my time done. And that way we can go to the park afterwards, And so they're at an age, they're my youngest two are 7 and 9 now, so they can understand more of what that looks like, right? Um, and and before that, it was I kind of would set myself up for like, okay, I can get this gym membership. Like this is how my brain works. I can get this gym membership. I can do a little workout for myself for 30 minutes to get that like good cardio in or lift some weights or something. And then I know that this gym will give me 2 hours of childcare. So, and I'm going to go during like this time where I'm most productive for these 2 hours. And that other hour and a half, like I'm going to work on my laptop or whatever it is on that task, and I had to learn, a lot of this stuff. I had my first child at 18 years old, and I was in college when I had him. I had him on a Monday and I was back to college the next Monday. So
Oh
kind of
wow.
like you, like I put myself in a situation where like, I had to be very intentional about my time. And so I am somebody that like, what are my top two or three things I need to get done that day? And like, how does, and I literally write like 6:15, get in the shower. Like that's just who, that's just how I am. Um, when I plan out my day. But I think also like just being flexible, like you're saying, and giving ourselves grace too is also necessary, for not living in the negative time of percent or the negativity of time, or like perceiving time as a negative, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, I really I love that what you did with the gym. That's amazing. Yeah. And
get
so
creative.
I also believe in looking at, and this will probably help with the overwhelm and procrastination. I look at different points. So we could have our feed forward controls, like what can I do before I'm going into a situation, to make sure that I'm getting ready for that situation. And a lot of times that might be, you know, I do emotional freedom technique or even just breathing so that again, and I'm asking myself, okay, what do I want to gain out of this next kind of time frame? And that
Mhm.
goes along with the roles too, right? Like if I know I'm going to do something with
Mhm.
my son and just take a moment, breathe so that I'm leaving behind whatever I just did to kind of move into my next kind of phase or role that you were mentioning. So I have a few of those, like I said, the emotional freedom. Sometimes
Yeah.
I actually will just jump on the spot, depending, like with the podcast and that. I had one last week and I was just kind of feeling low, that I jump in the spot just to kind of get myself ready, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I also have strategies if I'm in the middle of something and I can feel like the overwhelm coming or the anxiety, that I feel like, oh, this isn't going on the right track again, to take a moment, create that space
Yeah.
so that I become present
Yep.
and I can move forward, and taking a look at that. And then the third part of it is that feedback that we're all used to, and saying, okay, well, what worked, what didn't, what will I do next time? Without the judgment of like,
Mhm.
you should have known better. Well, obviously I didn't,
Yeah.
or I
Yeah.
haven't, so being able to take that in. So yeah, those are those are some things that I really try and help with clients and myself. And it's a progression, right? Oh, this is working really well. So I'm gonna, stay on that.
Yeah. So good. Well, we're coming to an end here, but is there any like key takeaway that you want to kind of leave listeners with or that you hope people will gain from today?
Yeah, great. I love the summary of it. And a lot of it is that it's experience, just like life, right?
Mhm.
It's experience, experiments. Um, don't be afraid to try something new because you're not going to know. And if we look and we compare, like, our time strategy, maybe you don't even have a time strategy and you've just been, saying, oh, I never have enough time.
Mhm.
Try something and try one thing. It doesn't have to be, I'm again, just like the goals, trying to do too many things, nothing's going to get done. Focus on the one thing, whether that just be creating awareness around how much am I, you know, doing the negative belief and the negative talk about time. Just even that to step into it and being able to kind of really take the next step, okay? And knowing what that looks like. For worry, I was just going to add in about worry,
Mm.
and decision making. And sometimes that's where the overwhelm comes is decide when you're going to make your decision,
Mm.
right? And then
Mhm. Yeah.
get the knowledge, get the skill, and a lot of situations will be the worry will be relieved by knowing that you're just going to gather up information and experiment and try and knowing, you know, what works for one might not work for you, but give it a try. Then you have the feedback to know whether or not it works. And everyone has the opportunity and to really live a life, a full life on their terms.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been so fun, and I really feel like I've learned a lot. I think this is just such a great topic for anybody to share with someone that is saying like, "Hey, I don't have enough time in my day." Because we all feel you when you say that, but there is strategy around it and things that we can do to change our perception around it as well, like Jennifer was talking about. So, where can listeners connect with you online and learn more about your time management strategies?
Yes, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm all Jennifer Sonnen. And then my website is Soenen Strategies, and I have that free productivity book. I have a free time quiz as well, and I do blogs every month in addition there. So
Very cool. And I will go ahead and add those links to the show notes so you guys will be able to find them there. But thank you so much, Jen, for coming on here with me today.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this episode as eye opening and motivating as I did. If you want to learn more about mastering your time and boosting your productivity, be sure to connect with Jennifer online. I feel like she just has so much wisdom to share. She's just such a calm presence and like just calmed me even on this episode on even managing my own time. So this has been so great. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone who might benefit from these insights. Until next time, keep growing, stay true to yourself, and remember, you've got this. Hey there, it's Jillian from Life Without Secrets. Ever feel like you and your partner aren't quite on the same page? Well, you're not alone, and that's exactly why I created our latest issue of Truthful magazine. It's packed with insights and stories about bridging that gap and finding a deeper connection. We're diving into real conversations about needs, feelings, and how honest dialogue can rekindle that closeness that you've been missing. Why not explore this together? Go grab your free copy right now at lifewithoutsecrets.com and turn those pages into shared moments. Can't wait for you to dive in and share your thoughts with me.